Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We got week 2 coming up. We're going to be giving you our starts and sits for the week. Dave Kluge and I have decided, based on your requests here, we're going to give you 3 starts each. So that's 6 players and then 2 sits. We prefer to be more positive about this. Who are the players you want to put in your lineup? Not who are you taking out? And Dave, this is a little bit more challenging to do it this early in week 2 because we don't know that much about these teams. We're having to do a lot of assumptions based off of what we saw in week 1, what we know to be true from previous years, and then really trying to figure out an injury report early on in the week.
Yeah, that's always tough. I've had so many questions about injuries. What should I do with this player? Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And I'm just going to cop out and tell everybody, like, if you're panicking about injuries, some guys that have logged some LPs early in the week, there's really nothing you can do about it except wait until Friday afternoon. That's when we get clarity. That's the last practice of the week, and that's when we'll find out when like 90% of these questionable players are going to play or not. But yeah, I think like the biggest thing is we did this a lot on yesterday's show, talking about like what's real and what's fake. What do you react to? What do you not react to? And I think one of the big things is like if you've got a talented player that didn't do great in week 1, don't panic and like swap him out for the guy who unexpectedly blew up in week 1. Like I think the theme of this show more than anything else is going to be like go back to start the guys that you drafted to be starters outside of the 2 guys we'll talk about at the end of the show.
I've been getting the questions from my friends like, do I start Hollywood Brown over Mike Evans? Do I? And I'm just like, let's relax. Let's take it down a notch.
Right.
But I'm also the same guy that's been sending out trade offers for Jamar Chase and Nico Collins and all these guys, seeing if I can take advantage of it. All right, Dave, let's do this. We're going to start with our starts of the week here. And we're being very intentional about this, where we're not just going to be like, hey, go and start Jamar Chase. That helps nobody. What we want to do is look at a bunch of players that are kind of on the fringe. Are they maybe wide receiver 2s, maybe running back 2s? Can they be flex plays, maybe a tight end streamer, a quarterback streamer? So, Dave, the first guy you want to talk about is Calvin Ridley going up against the Los Angeles Rams. You and I both have him at wide receiver 30 and 31, respectively.
Yeah, and that being said, do start Jamar Chase. We're not talking about him because you should start him. Like, don't overreact to that. But yeah, Calvin Ridley. He got Pat Surtain last week. Like we knew going into the week that it was going to be a very, very tough cornerback matchup. And he still pulled a 32% target share, had 11th highest among all wide receivers on the week last week. And like I said at the top of the show, like one of my tenets when it comes to fantasy football is not to overreact to week 1. Go back to the guys that you drafted to be starters in week 2. And I think Calvin Ridley qualifies for that. In addition to the role that we saw him operating as the wide receiver 1, pulling the majority of the targets, even with a tough matchup, Cam Ward looked good, a lot better than the box score might imply. He looked very comfortable and he was just running the offense. Like it never seemed like the moment was too big for him. We see a lot of times, these year 1, year 2 quarterbacks, they're really scrambling, the game moving too fast for them. And I didn't get that feeling with Cam Ward. So I'm still holding on to hope for this offense as a whole. And now, we've got Surtain out of the picture. He's going to have a much easier matchup this week against the Rams defense. The Titans are underdogs in this game. So we expect that late in the game, they will be forced to throw. And Calvin Ridley is just the unquestioned wide receiver 1 on a team that's going to have to throw the ball probably more than they want to in the second half. This guy pulled an elite target share last week. I don't expect that to change going into week 2. So yeah, I've got him just outside of my top 30, but anybody inside my top 36 is qualifying as a wide receiver 3, which means you're playing him in that or your flex spot. I've heard a lot of start sit questions about Calvin Ridley, and unless you are just like dripping with wide receiver depth, I'm not benching him in almost any leagues.
I need you to pick a better word than dripping with wide receiver depth, because that sounds awful. Yeah, I mean, there should be a lot more scoring in this game here, Titans versus the Rams. Like, this is going to be probably a lot more pass heavy of a game than we saw last week. Cam Ward didn't look bad, man. Like he really, there's been a lot of differing opinions. I've seen Cam Ward looked objectively terrible. Okay, by what's
First of all, nothing about film analysis is objective. So if somebody's saying that, just stop listening to them.
Right. And so, like, yeah, he looked fine. Did he make mistakes? Sure. But like you said, he looked comfortable. And that's the big thing here is we've got a guy who's got the arm. He's going to continue to target Calvin Ridley. I like this one. Weirdly enough, you mentioned it pre-show. You're like, well, you have Calvin Ridley 1 spot higher in the rankings. This is embarrassing. But yeah, we both like him. Start Calvin Ridley. I'm going to give you my guy, DeVonta Smith, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. And Dave, I've got him at wide receiver 27. You've got him at wide receiver 28. And really what I like most about DeVonta Smith this week is go back to last week and look at what happened with that offense. Going up against the Dallas Cowboys and their zone defense, it's actually something that's been kind of known is that Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles do not throw to the wide receivers as much when they're going up against teams that run a zone defense in the secondary. And Dallas played exclusively, almost exclusively zone. I think they just had a handful of plays, 2 to 3 plays there where they actually ran a man concept. And that's why you get such a big game out of Dallas Goedert underneath, Saquon Barkley out in the flats. And then when they're playing zone like that, it's easy for these guys to find the soft spots in there. And so going up against Kansas City this week, they play a lot more man, 11th highest rate in the NFL last year. We got to see what Justin Herbert and the Chargers were able to do in week 1. It wasn't just one receiver that got to feast. It was all 3. DeVonta Smith is absolutely in a really good spot this week. AJ Brown still seems to be dealing with that hamstring injury. Dallas Goedert looks like he might be out this game with the knee issue. So, I mean, I know it's just 1 week here, but after week 1, the Chiefs are allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers. You got DeVonta Smith in a nearly, I would say, must-start scenario here, a game where there could be, once again, a lot of throwing, a secondary scheme that works in his favor, and injuries around him that make him a low-end wide receiver too. So, Dave, I'm starting DeVonta Smith this week.
Yeah, and you say the Chiefs are allowing the most points to wide receivers. I'm saying that the Los Angeles Chargers are scoring the most points out of their wide receivers. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And this is one where we do expect them to have to throw the ball often. I don't know if AJ Brown is just going to like magically heal and be healthy. And I think the usage we saw from Dallas Goedert last week, we see often. Like if AJ Brown or DeVonta Smith has to miss a game, then Dallas Goedert really steps up as a secondary option and is very useful in fantasy. Right. And the splits with and without A.J. Brown are going to show that A.J. Brown was on the field last week, but if you watch the game, he really wasn't.
Like, he was
just running decoy routes. Exactly, yeah. He was just out there trying to clear out space for other guys. And that's why we saw Dallas Goedert just sitting there in zone coverage, just eating up targets nonstop. So I do like this call out. They're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. And if A.J. Brown is still gimpy out there and Dallas Goedert isn't available, I don't think Jahan Dotson is going to be the wide receiver one there. So, yeah, this is one where I have DeVonta Smith much higher in my week 2 rankings than I had in my draft rankings.
And I would say that if you are in one of those deep leagues, 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, and you have injuries, Jahan Dotson's not a bad flyer to throw out there. He's like I'm not saying you need him out there. He becomes a wide receiver, 5 type deal here in fantasy rankings if Goddard is out and AJ Brown's still hamstrung. All right, let's go to the next guy on here. Time stands still for Keenan Allen, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders this week. Last week, Keenan Allen looked great, man. He looked to be just right back to his old self, meshing with Justin Herbert and this offense, right back into the role that made him such a fantasy star for years and years. Dave, I've got him as a wide receiver 3, but you are closer and closer to putting him almost as a wide receiver 2. You've got him at wide receiver 29, so he's kind of in that low-end wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 3 flex territory for you.
Yeah, and Keenan Allen, he really changed his game after that ACL tear that he had early in his career. He was a guy who really relied on athleticism. We saw a lot of vertical routes early in his career. And then coming off that ACL tear, he really shored up his route running. And these are the types of guys that we see playing late into their career with really, really good success. So I think a lot of people are going to see the age for Keenan Allen and just say it's only a matter of time before he falls off. But this is a guy that I think still has 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 years left in the tank because he is just such a savvy route runner. It's a little nuances to his game that allow him to just immediately separate, first step off the line of scrimmage, and he's already getting separation there. He and Justin Herbert have this great chemistry together. We saw it back in 2023, where Keenan Allen had a huge year and finished as a top 20 fantasy wide receiver. Last year, he dealt with some injuries, so I think people are going to look at the production and say, well, the stats went down from 2023 to 2024, but if you look on a per game basis, he still led the team in target share, a team with DJ Moore and Roma Dunze and Cole Kmet. He was still the number one target earner on that team. And just last week, he pulled a 29.4% target share in the Chargers offense. He's got a very high value role. I don't think he's ever going to be that guy again who's running 40 yards downfield and mossing defenders and scoring these big touchdowns, but he's just a target magnet underneath. And he's got that chemistry with Justin Herbert, where even if Ladd McConkey is the first read, he has faith knowing that if Ladd McConkey is not open, he can look to his second read in Keenan Allen and just immediately fire the ball to him. He's just a good player, and it's as simple as that. And he's got a good matchup here against a bad secondary going up against Las Vegas. So I think a lot of people are worried because of where he was going in drafts. But I said it in the preseason that he was just one of the best values out there. We saw Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, all of these other aging receivers going so far ahead of him in drafts. And I think there was some fear early in the offseason because he hadn't signed with the team. But as soon as he signed with the Chargers, he should have moved up, 8-10 rounds, and it just didn't happen for whatever reason. So even though you might have drafted him in round 12 of your fantasy draft, and that feels like a bench player, I think we've seen enough from week one that we can move him up into our starting lineups.
Keenan Allen, still one of my favorite draft picks I got to make this year. Final round 18. He was just sitting there.
Round 18.
And this was in an industry league. This was the week before he signed with the Chargers. And I was just like, you know what? Let me take the flyer.
Makes sense, yeah.
Let me do it. And then boom, week later. Very different, man. He still looked very good, and a lot of this came down to like just where Justin Herbert was looking on each of these plays. Like there were plays where I think we can assume it was designed for Keenan, or that's just where Herbert wanted to go because he knew that Keenan would be there for him. Like there's something to be said about the intangible of anticipation and chemistry and quarterbacks having confidence in their wide receivers, and it immediately became a thing. The only reason I don't have Keenan Allen higher in this matchup, because it is a good matchup, is it's also a good matchup for the running game. And I think this could be a get right game for Amari in Hampton, which is why I'm not cautious about Keenan Allen. I think you still start him. I'm not as high as you. I'm 8 spots behind. So it's not like a huge difference there.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that I want to mention, and I'm looking it up right now because I know there was much ado made last year about having him a career high drop rate, which, first of all, drops are fluky. They're really tough to predict. But Alfredo, I know
he was
you
a
played
bear.
football
It made sense.
when you're younger. Well, it's not even that. Have you tried catching a ball when it's cold outside?
Oh, yeah, it's awful.
It is a lot harder.
It happened
so
once.
I think him
It
being
happened
back,
once in Florida. It was cold. Yeah.
So maybe you don't have this experience, but I played football growing up in Chicago, and when a football hits your hands in the freezing cold, it feels like you are getting
it
stabbed
sucks,
with
man.
1,000 tiny needles.
sucks.
It
It's
is
the worst.
brutal. So yeah, now being back in Los Angeles, I don't expect those same drops that we saw last year to carry over into this year.
All right, next guy on here. I'm going to give you a running back. I'm talking about David Montgomery for the Detroit Lions going up against the Chicago Bears. Dave, you got him at running back 27. I'm a bit higher. I've got him at running back 20. I am all back aboard the Monty train here. I know there's probably going to be some concerns about the Lions and what their offense is going to be giving us. I think what has me probably most worried about the Lions and their passing game is what you and I were talking about before the show, is that Ben Johnson knows all of the strengths and weaknesses of Jared Goff. If there's anyone that can take away his strengths and really focus on the weaknesses, it's going to be Ben Johnson here, giving the team everything they need to know, which tells me, and I don't want to be going too far down narrative street, but this is a team that's going to have to rely on the run a bit more. And we might see Jared Goff continue to just keep dumping it off to the running backs, just like he did in week 1 with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. We saw last week against Chicago, Jordan Mason looked good against the Bears. And then with David Montgomery, the thing is, he's scored at least 15 PPR points in each of his last 2 games against Chicago. He had 4 targets last week. He's on pace to, obviously, I don't want to do that thing where he's on pace to match blah, blah, blah after 1 game. But if he's keeping up that kind of target volume, that would be tying his career high. So like, this is a different aspect to Dave Montgomery's game that is not typically there. We're still learning what this offense is going to look like. Listen, man, it's very possible. The Lions offense could just be bad this year. It could just be night and day of what it was last year to this year. But for David Montgomery, he's kind of that consistent presence in the offense. There's only been 1 time in his career with the Lions where he has gone 2 games in a row without a touchdown. If that were to happen, he didn't get a touchdown.
Crazy.
Yeah, he didn't get a touchdown last week. If it happened again, it would be sort of just a very fluky thing. I'm leaning more towards David Montgomery falling into the end zone, being a bigger part of the offense this week, someone that they have to rely on, because you simply can't plan for a good running game. Like you can't. Passing game, pressure on the quarterback, yes. A good running game, it's a lot harder to try to beat. That's why so many of these coaches try to establish it early. Because if you're just getting out muscled and out efforted, that's going to be tough. So David Montgomery is a guy I'm going to be leaning into this week. He's an RB2 for me.
And I think a lot of people are going to see the 4 targets from last week and say, it feels kind of fluky. But David Montgomery is a very, very good pass catcher. And he just shares a backfield with a better pass catcher in Jahmyr Gibbs. But I think that this is a different offense. They weren't willing to push the ball downfield quite as much as they were last year. And this could just be, week 1 on the road against a tough Packers defense. And maybe they could adjust now that they're playing at home. But if we do see this offense change to this more dink and dunk style where they're throwing the ball out in the flat to the running backs a lot more, David Montgomery does have that skill set. I looked back in 2020, his second year with the Bears, he pulled 68 targets, and he missed a game that year too. He was averaging 4.5 targets per game that season. So we saw like Jahmyr Gibbs still got his as a pass catcher last week, and there was still enough left over for Montgomery to have a big role in the passing game as well. So I am interested to see what this offense looks like in the post-Ben Johnson era, because we saw a lot of short throws to the running backs. And if that carries over for the rest of the season, Montgomery could end up being a really, really nice value.
Yeah, man, he's sort of a lock RB2 every week. At the very worst, he's a flex. Like he should be someone that's in your lineup. All right, Dave. Next one on here. You've got Keon Coleman, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. I've got him as my wide receiver 35. You've got him as your wide receiver 37. Odd because I feel like I'm not high on him, but almost because of the upside of the Josh Allen offense, I felt like I needed to keep him this high. And this is one of those where I'd rather start him and be wrong than not put him in my lineup and miss out on the continued success. Sorry if I just stole your talking point.
No, I think that's just a perfect way to look at this. And this is something Chris Harris says all the time. Like, can you stomach drafting a player who's going to, like, it's all about risk tolerance. Like, do you want to have a guy go off for 30 points on your bench, or do you want to put him in your lineup and take the 5 points? I know I would rather take, especially like this isn't a guy that you're plugging in as a wide receiver 1. This is a flex option. And I think that you should be chasing upside with those flex options. And Keon Coleman wasn't a player that I was crazy about. Like, neither of us were really crazy about the prospect. There were a lot of red flags in his profile, but he looked good last week. And I think that there's going to be some trepidation in starting him this week because of Sauce Gardner. But what we did, like, we don't see Sauce Gardner really being that guy that just like glues to one receiver anymore. He kind of stays on his side of the field. They're going to move Keon Coleman around a little bit. This outside of Sauce Gardner, this is a really weak cornerbacking group in New York. Coleman pulled 11 targets last week, which is a lot for him. No other wide receiver on the team even had more than 9. And we also saw a mix of high value targets, like a lot of different type of targets. He had 2 deep targets. He had 2 end zone targets. He had 2 red zone targets. He had 2 manufactured touches. He was also, one-on-one on the 2-point conversion, and they lofted up a jump ball opportunity for him. So like, he is starting to develop as that guy here. And I love Khalil Shakir, very, very good player, but they're very different types of players as well. Keon Coleman is the win outside on the boundary, come down with the jump balls. Khalil Shakir is the savvy route runner that can play across the middle of the field and make plays after the catch. So I see a very complementary skill set here. And I just wonder, people are so quick to like want to fade somebody coming into the league because they don't believe in the prospect. And then if they have a down rookie season, everybody just like declares them done, like their career is over. But this is a young guy who the Bills liked enough to take with the first pick in round 2. He's catching passes from the MVP on what's a good offense. I still do have some concerns about his contested catch ability and his route running and things like that, but it doesn't seem like Josh Allen and the Bills brass has those same concerns. It looks like they want to make him a focal point in this offense. So yeah, if I'm going for the upside here, I think Keon Coleman has immense upside, a guy who can pull double-digit targets again from the league's best quarterback.
Yeah, those things you mentioned, the worries about like the route running and the contested catchability. A lot of people talk about the contested catchability as like he's really good at it, and no, it's
And the
actually
numbers didn't back it up.
yeah, the numbers didn't back it up. It's that he will every once in a while make the really nice highlight play, and that's what makes it. That's what circulates around. So we see that, and you see a tall guy, and you assume he's good at that.
He's George Pickens without target competition.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there's. I think Pickens is better, but this is there was a couple things from this game that I found to be interesting is first, he wasn't getting targeted a lot early in the game. And
Mhm.
then as the offense really needed to get itself going, they found their rhythm with Keon Coleman. And a lot of that had to do with what Coleman is so good at. He's really good at playing backyard football, where once Josh
Yes.
Allen is on the move, he makes himself available to the quarterback. And to me, that's one of the most underrated things that a wide receiver can do is, can you help your quarterback when he's in trouble? And so Josh Allen, great at escaping pressure, great throwing out on the run, on the move. Keon Coleman matches that to a T. That's one of the things I loved about him coming out, and his fit with the Bills as a rookie. The route running still needs to get better. The contested catch stuff still needs to get better. I hated, what was it? It was 2-point conversion, I believe, where they just
Mhm.
tossed one up for Keon Coleman. I hate the play call there, but what it tells you is that they
It's a lot of
trust him.
faith.
Exactly. They trust him. And
Mhm.
so I think this is something that we're seeing where we might start to see a little bit more trust. We're still not getting the Dalton Kincaid thing happening, man. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
a bummer.
And I think with Keon Coleman too, like a very similar profile to Quentin Johnston. And like like a lot of the analytics guys don't like these players because they have red flags and they often take time to develop. So I think that's why like I thought I was out on Keon Coleman until I started doing some dynasty startups this offseason. And I was like, wait, you're telling me I can get Keon Coleman in like round 15 of a dynasty startup? And then I start doing best ball drafts and I'm like, okay, now he's fallen into like round 14 of best ball drafts. And it's one where like I thought I was going to be out on Keon Coleman, but the consensus opinion was so far out on Keon Coleman that I was like, well, I like him better than this. Like I like him better than
Right.
everybody else, apparently. So yeah, I think that there's an opportunity here. Like I think a lot of people are going to write off that week one performance and say, like, it was fluky. He sucked as a rookie. He can't do all these things well. So not only would I say start him now, but if there is a manager out there that's saying like they want to sell high on Keon Coleman after one game, this is one where I'd go out and like try to buy Keon Coleman because I think you can still get him for much cheaper than his rest of season upside.
Let's go to the next one on here. And I believe this is going to be our last start of the week here. I'm going with the tight end. I'm going with the streamer. And I mean, if you drafted him, he's probably not a streamer. He's probably your guy. Or if you picked him up, Kyle Pitts, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. And I know we just saw how good that Minnesota Vikings defense can be, but guys, I also watched the first half of that game. And I watched how the Bears were able to move the ball up and down the field on the Minnesota Vikings and how they were able to target players out of the slot. Alameda Zacchaeus, Dave? Alameda Zacchaeus?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're currently winning the bet. He's like wide receiver 54 right now in fantasy. So we'll see. We'll
Just
see.
wait until he gets in the end zone a couple of times, pacing for 120 targets.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
looking good.
Yep. Extrapolating data always works out for us. But one thing I want to look at here though is Kyle Pitts, 58% of his snaps were in the slot or out wide. He's not, and we've known this about him. He's not just strictly an inline tight end. Got Darnell Mooney potentially not playing this week. I know he went back to practice. He's still dealing with his injury. I think it's more likely he's back in week 3. Drake London looking questionable right now. Seems more likely he does play. Regardless of who's playing, regardless of the matchup this week, what I really noticed that stood out to me most is the usage for Kyle Pitts was very, very different. Dave, this was the shortest yards per target of his career. 4.5
Mhm.
yards per target. It's less than half of his career average. He is a guy that the Falcons have tried to use to stretch the field consistently, as opposed to let's get him those easy Dallas Goedert targets underneath and just let him run with the ball after the catch. And now they're finally doing that here in Atlanta. His catch rate is way up, another 30% up. He was at 87% catch rate this week, which is something that he really has not done throughout his career. He's normally being asked to win on crazy jump balls and win on seams against safeties. And it's just something that never came to fruition with Kyle Pitts. But if this is what works in the chemistry with he and Michael Penix, all of a sudden we're looking at a very different tight end. And what makes tight ends so valuable in fantasy is, can they be a top 2 target earner on their team? And can they create after the catch? And if this is the same style of Kyle Pitts that we're going to get throughout the season, I'm kind of in. Not only am I in this week, but I might be in on the rest of the season. So a lot of people went out and scrambled and started paying a lot of fab for Harold Fannin and Juwan Johnson and a lot of the players that were on the waiver wire this week. Kyle Pitts, I I think I'm back. I think I'm back in.
Oh man. And then like it's funny, I'm saying that I'm not in, and I think I actually have Kyle Pitts ranked a spot higher than you this week, but like I still like it
Let me
feels
see. Yeah, you do.
wrong.
I've got him at tight end 11.
It,
You got him at tight end 10.
and maybe this is just because like I held the torch for Kyle Pitts for so long, but like have you ever gotten back with an ex-girlfriend and then you start like second guessing everything? Like why didn't she answer her phone? Like what's she doing? And like it's just like not a great reunion because like you're still holding on to like all of the
I
baggage
pulled,
from your
yeah,
previous
I was
relationship.
Job in Arrested Development. I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah, and that's like almost how I feel. So like, yeah, I see the raw production and I'm like, it's really good, but then I start like second guessing in it, and I'm like, he only had one target in the first half. 5 of his 8 targets came in the fourth quarter when Drake London was injured. So I think that's my fear is that like we did see a lot of garbage time late in the game when Drake London was out,
Well, London only went
but
out for like
we
the
also saw Kyle
final
Pitts look good.
drive. It wasn't even
Right.
that like I will say like Pitts was getting targeted
It was 2 of
while
those.
London was still in the
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 2 of the catches were on the final drive, but 5 of his 8 targets overall did come in the fourth quarter. So I think that's like where I have a little bit of pause. But that being said, he did look good.
Mhm.
And this was a very different role than we've seen him playing in the past, like you mentioned, where he is getting these like short catches where he was able to like catch the ball in stride and turn up field and make plays after the catch. And that's something we've never really seen from Kyle Pitts before. So I see the upside, but I also like am very intentionally trying to find where this could go wrong because I've seen the upside with Kyle Pitts since he came into the league and it feels like it always ends up going bust. So maybe I'm just like setting myself up for the potential heartbreak that I feel will inevitably happen. But yeah, I've got him as my tight end 10, which very much so makes him a start this week.
I mean, there's just so many injuries at the tight end position. We don't know who's going to be playing. I mean, George Kittle is out. Dallas Goedert's looking like he's out. Brock Bowers is dealing with an injury. And there's just guys like we're reaching into the bag and saying, you know what, let's start Jawan Johnson and Brenton Strange and we're in Hunter Henry and we're looking for all these different streamers. And I still genuinely believe Kyle Pitts might be the best choice out of all those streamers there. And like you said, he's a start this week. We'll see where it keeps going though.
I agree. And I'm starting him this week, but also I'm very familiar with the Kyle Pitts ride. And don't be
That's
surprised
fair.
when he has 1 target and Charlie Warner has 2 touchdowns
It's
this week.
it's listen, man, it's fair. Like I think the theme for this show is that we simply don't know what these offenses are yet. And that's why
Right.
we always preach to not overreact to what happens in week 1 because we simply don't know what these teams are. Like I remember last season, Jalen Hurts was like quarterback 16 after week 1. Jamar Chase had 3 bad weeks to start the year and then finishes as the wide receiver
Mhm.
1. Like there's so
Triple
much
crown.
that happens, man. Like I'm not going to go out on a limb here and say Kyle Pitts is becoming a starting tight end in fantasy, but I'm saying
Right.
if this usage continues and Michael Penix continues to play this way, because he didn't look great early in the game, we might have something cooking over there in Atlanta.
And I'll also say, just to add some context, I've got him as my tight end 10, but I have a tier all the way down to tight end 16 that like really nothing is separating this guy. So like Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry, David Njoku, Zach Ertz, Brenton Strange, Harold Fannin, Juwan Johnson. I do kind of have all of those guys lumped together, and I do have Pitts atop that tier. But I also think that like you, the listener, are going to have to make this decision yourself. And if you say like I prefer Zach Ertz or I would prefer Harold Fannin or Juwan Johnson, I wouldn't blame anybody for starting one of those guys ahead of Kyle Pitts.
I feel like whoever's watching or listening, they just pulled the Drewski meme where they're like, me? And they just point at themselves. You're like, you, the listener, you go figure it out.
Yeah, I can we can give you the stats, we can give you the data, we can give you the context, but at the end of the day, like I'm not gonna take your phone out of your hand and start your lineup for you. You got to make that decision yourself.
All right, let's go to our players that we are willing to sit. And Dave,
I am cracking up at this.
what a theme!
Yeah, yeah.
Let's just put it. I mean, go ahead. You can do yours first here. But Tyreek Hill, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New England Patriots. I've got him at wide receiver 29. You've got him at wide receiver 33. Dave.
I think we're just gonna say the same things here. The Miami Dolphins
Yeah.
offense is broken. Tyreek Hill had 6 targets last week, only played 63% of the snaps, visibly frustrated on the sideline. I think that unless Mike McDaniel gets fired or Tyreek Hill gets traded, it's going to be bad. He had 2 games last year where he scored more than 20 points. Like, that is not the Tyreek Hill that we expect in this offense. He still looks fine, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Like, he still is able to get open and he still looks quick, but the coaching staff just doesn't trust Tua and the offensive line. They don't want him getting hurt.
They run
so
the
it's just
same 5 plays over and over and over. They run the same levels concept over and over. The deep crosser, like, guys, pick something new.
Yeah. So let's hear your sit of the week, Alfredo.
Yeah, my sit of the week is Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New England Patriots. I got him as my wide receiver 41. Dave, you're at wide receiver 38. And I mean, the things we talked about earlier in this week too, for the Dolphins, they have 2 starting offensive linemen that are going to be out this week. Right tackle Austin Jackson, which is Tua's blind side, and then right guard James Daniels got hurt. He will be out as well. So the Dolphins are going to be starting 2 new players along an offensive line that is already pretty bad, that is starting a rookie at left guard and a first-year starter at left tackle. There's not a lot of hope for the Miami Dolphins offense this week. Tua Tagovailoa looked terrible. Dave, there's like the rumors that are circulating amongst Dolphins fans, which I saw this earlier by Joe Shad, he works for the Palm Beach Post. He does a lot of reporting on the Miami Dolphins. That the Miami Dolphins, the like posts that have been on socials are up by like 6,000%, and including words like fire, horrible. It's just awful.
I want a word cloud. Cloud of the replies to Dolphins tweets.
It's terrible.
Yes, that would be amazing.
But one of the things going out there, and I don't want us to speculate on it, is like fans are actually worried that on the bad hit that Tua took from his blind side did he hit his head again? Because I don't want to speculate on that, but the offense just looked horrible. And that's where we're at as like a fan base, is where
oh my god! Every time I see a defender getting near Tua,
yeah,
like there's no other player that is on an NFL field that like every time he's about to take a hit, I like hold my breath and like tense up.
And that's the thing here, is it's not even like if something happened, last week, or if it's going to happen next week. It's that the vibes around this team are just absolutely terrifying right now. And Mike McDaniel, he's the what are you gonna do, stab me meme, man who got stabbed, where he's like, it can't get any worse. Like, dude, it can. You lost 2 offensive linemen here. It is getting worse. For Jaylen Waddle, he left last week with a shoulder injury for a little bit, came back. He's been limited in practice throughout the week, which, by the way, if you've been on the Jaylen Waddle experience before, you know this is how it goes. He spends the equal amount of time in the blue tent as he does on the field. And Dave, this was when I started digging into it. This actually has me very worried about Jaylen Waddle just as a player for fantasy. Less than 50 yards receiving in 11 of his last 15 games. Only 6 touchdowns in his last 30 games. You talked about how Tyreek hasn't had a 20-point game, like many 20-point games over his like last however many. Jaylen Waddle hasn't even been startable in 11 of his last 15 games. He's not even giving you upside anymore over his last nearly 3 seasons of work, 2 seasons, let's say. It's just, it's not good. It's not good. Not only is he a not start, like I'm trying to trade him to someone who's like, oh, cool, I'm going to go buy low on the Dolphins because it'll get better. I don't want him on my team.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think things might get better. Like,
it might.
You see it all the time. Like, just firing a coach, even if you don't bring in like a good coach, like sometimes that's just enough to re-energize the team. And we'll see kind of how this happens here. But let's try to put some like actionable spins on this for the listeners. Like, talk about some guys that we would actually start ahead of Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, because I think that's valuable. Yeah. Like Keenan Allen. I've got Keenan Allen ahead of Tyreek Hill this week. Right. And I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, I spent a 3rd round pick on Tyreek Hill and I got Keenan Allen in the 13th. Why would I do that? Well, go watch both games from week 1 and you'll see exactly why you should do that.
Don't watch both games. Just trust us because we watch them.
Ricky Pearsall, I've got him ahead of Tyreek Hill. Deebo Samuel, a guy that I had, a little bit of an offseason fade on, looked really good. Kind of the primary weapon right now in this Commanders offense. I've got him ahead of Tyreek Hill. DeVonta Smith, who we just talked about, Jacoby Myers, Travis Hunter, even with some of the buzz about him playing a little bit more on defense, I'd start him ahead of Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
George Pickens.
I've got DeVonta Smith ahead of Tyreek as well.
Yep, DeVonta Smith as well. And Marquise Brown, I have like 2 spots behind.
Same. Exactly 2
Tyreek
spots.
Hill. That being said, if you are saying, I like what I saw from Marquise Brown better than Tyreek Hill. I wouldn't blame anybody for starting Hollywood Brown over Tyreek Hill this week. So, yeah, I've got a pretty hard fade on him unless we see something change in Miami.
Yeah, I've got Keenan Allen and Keon Coleman, your two of your starts of the week, ahead of Jaylen Waddle. I've got Cedric Tillman ahead of Jaylen Waddle.
Same.
Roma Dunze ahead of Jaylen Waddle. I'm not very high on Jaylen Waddle. And in fact, I think I need to be lower because I have him as my wide receiver 41. And apparently I'm ahead of Football Guys consensus on this. So like I need to get more aggressive in how much I don't want to start someone. But there you have it, guys. There you have it. 6 players to start this week. 2 players that we are not starting in our lineups. Dave, it's been a crazy week 1 to week 2 transition here. And it was good to get back into the swing of things, doing our weekly shows, giving the audience what they're looking for here each week. And we're gonna be back again next Monday to give you guys our waiver wire pickups, and then like we did this week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to be with you guys every single week throughout the fantasy season. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, either on YouTube. If you're watching, please give this video a like, comment down below with your thoughts, your questions. We'll do our best to answer each and every one of those. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave a review, 5 stars if you can. It's a huge help for us. As always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.